So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. So your presence here, listening to my podcast means a lot to me. I know you people out there who are listening are busy people. You have kids, you have grandkids, you have all sorts of things going on in your life. And the fact that you tune into this podcast is very meaningful to me. So thank you for doing that. If you like what you hear, don't be afraid to share this with your family, your friends, other people. The reason why I ask that is because, number one, I'm trying to build an audience so people can listen to what we have to say. And number two, because I have brought before you, and today is no exception, I promise, I have brought before you amazing people who are activists, who have great energy, who are doing things which are meaningful out there in the world. And for that purpose alone, I want people to hear what we have to say. So it's not about Bob Hamilton. It's about the people I bring on the show, actually. So today it is such an honor for me to welcome Ruth R. Wisse to the Hamilton Review. Ruth, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
I am so glad to be here with you.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ruth, and then I'm going to let her talk. But she was a professor of Yiddish literature and comparative literature at Harvard University between 1993 and 2014. So if I do my math right, that's about 21 years. Before that, she helped to found the Department of Jewish Studies at McGill University in Canada. She is currently a senior fellow at the Tikvah Fund and a recipient of his Herzl Prize. She has written widely on cultural and political subjects for the Wall Street Journal, Commentary, National Affairs, and other publications. This is a busy woman, friends. She's written books, including things like The Shlemiel as Modern Hero, the Modern Jewish Canon, which is a journey through literature and culture. She has been awarded in 2007. She was awarded the National Humanities Medal, and in 2004, an honorary degree by Yeshiva University back there in New York. So, Ruth Wisse, you come on the Hamilton Review with incredible credentials.
Well, I'm not so young, so I've had time to do some work.
Well, I don't know if I lived to be 200, I don't think I would be able to accomplish what you have done in your lifetime. So congratulations. You're obviously a very diligent and hardworking person. So, Ruth, I'd like to have my guest introduce himself to a degree. I've given kind of a thumbnail sketch of who you are and what you've done. But if you would be kind enough to just share with our listeners today a little bit about your background, where you're from. I know a lot about you because I've been reading your book, but yes. You actually were born in Europe. And tell us a little bit about your story and your parents. And how you ended up here in the New World. So, Ruth, the microphone belongs to you.
Thanks very much, Bob. Well, everyone has a story, and everyone who was born in 1936 in East Central Europe, as I was born in what was then Romania, but which is today Ukraine. The borders keep shifting. And the truth is that there should have been at least another maybe 600,000 people like me, my own age, alive at this point who are not. So I've always felt a kind of responsibility for simply having been taken out of Europe when I was 4 years old to live in Canada and grow up there. And what was miraculous was not my doing. It was the doing of other people who made sure that this happened to me. So my parents were then living in Czernowitz, and all of this I describe in the book. So if you think it's interesting, maybe your readers would like to read it. It is an interesting story. Not because it's mine, but simply it is it tells a very important story about how one gets to live, actually.
Yeah.
So father had realized that it was time to get out of Europe. And his father had realized that it was time for him to get out, for his children to get out of Europe. So in 1940, when the war was already on, when World War II was already very much in progress, we fled. And we crossed quite miraculously. We got a ship that took us to New York Harbor. It was a ship that was decommissioned on its return voyage.
Wow.
It was never a passenger ship anymore after that because it was used in the war effort.
Wow.
But we got to the New World. And what was most miraculous about that was that the Canadian immigration policy at the time about Jews from Europe was none is too many. The people who wrote the history of that period called their book None is Too Many, because that was what the official Ottawa policy was. They did not want Jews entering Canada.
Yeah.
So that we got in was as miraculous as that we got out.
Yeah. So you got in because your grandfather, David, who I think by the way, I want to interject real quickly. The book that we're talking about that Ruth has alluded to is called Free as a Jew. It is a personal memoir of national self-liberation. And Ruth Wisse spells her name Ruth with an R. And Wisse is how she spells her last name. But I think just reading this beautiful memoir that you have written, your grandfather David, who was blind the last decades of his life, you make such a poignant point that he was blind, but he could see the evil that was coming over Europe, and it was really at his impetus that I believe he motivated his sons, you being one of his granddaughters, of course, to get going. Did David make it out of Europe?
No, he did not. He did not. He was already in his 80s, and he just instructed one of his sons and then his oldest grandson to go to Canada. How he imagined this, I don't know, but he realized that there was a depression in Canada. He was in the textile business.
Yeah.
They were in the textile business. And he said, if you go to Canada, you can buy a mill there, which is not working. You can get it working. And that's how you can go there and start another life there. And of course, they intended to bring him over. That was their intention, to bring him and their sister to Canada. But the four brothers did make it. And the father, who had, as you say, initiated this, and his daughter, who had stayed with her family to take care of him, they did not get out. And so they were murdered. And the rest of the family, was happily kept alive. Yeah. So yes, it's but as I say, this is a story that everybody my age who was born in East Central Europe and who is still alive to tell the tale, Jews, I mean, it is always an unusual story. I mean, it's like you sort of think of yourself as being one in a million, because you were fated actually to be not alive.
Yeah. No, you were fortunate, and I think that we're going to talk a little bit about this concept of gratitude and how you're such a big believer in this. But I interrupted your story. So you made it to Ottawa to their damnation. Didn't want one of you. None is too many. I think the fact that you had already purchased the textile mill, maybe that was what got you through the door there. Yes. But it was a little bit of a miracle that you made it. And so we both going and coming. It was the doors kind of opened, I guess a little bit like the Red Sea there, right? For you guys.
Quite.
But here you are. You made it, and tell us a little bit about your life in Canada. You were a young girl. Obviously, you probably have very few memories of arrival, but certainly you grew up in Canada, and that story is interesting too.
Well, Montreal, the city that we came to in Canada, was a fascinating place to grow up. And Quebec is still a very fascinating province within Canada. Quebec is the French province within, an English country,
Yep.
essentially, and
Yep.
it remained French. So French speaking, Catholic. When I grew up there, it was a very Catholic place. I think that it was considered to be the most really thickly Catholic culture um, outside of Europe.
Wow.
And, so it was, when we were raised there, it was easier to be a Jew in a Jewish community than basically anywhere in the United States of America. Why is that? Because the United States has, let's say, a public school system. And it has the idea that everyone who comes into the United States becomes an American citizen.
Yep.
And there's a sense of America being a melting pot. That's a term that's often used for it, which means that everybody comes together. And both the idea and the reality of it in those days was very powerful. Canada was very different. It saw itself as a mosaic, not a melting pot. And what made it that was the fact that the French Canadian culture, the French Canadians were always distinctive within Canada.
Yep.
So to be in Quebec was rather different than, let's say, being in New York, because there, French were already there, the English were already there. And when I was growing up there was no public school system. There was a confessional school system, which meant that there were French schools, which were Catholic and French. And then there was a Protestant school system, which was English and Protestant. These were both religious school systems.
Yeah.
If you believe it or not, the law actually said Jews, for the purposes of education, will be considered Protestant. Love that.
So how do you feel about that, Ruth? That makes me chuckle. Well,
it was, look, it depends what you're expecting.
Yeah.
Believe me, one understood that it was so much better than the alternatives.
I want you to know that I do know a lot of Protestants who are very philo-Semitic. I want you to know that. So
no, this was not. But you see here, I don't want to be misunderstood. God forbid. It was not anti-Semitic. That in itself was not at all.
Yeah.
They just didn't know what to do with the Jews who were there.
Sure.
We're neither Catholic nor Protestant.
Right.
What were we going to do with them? Well, the Jews themselves, many of them, created their own answer. They said, look, we're neither Protestant nor Catholic. Let's build our own Jewish schools.
Sure.
So that's why I grew up in a wonderful Jewish elementary school, and then went to a Protestant high school that was 95% Jewish in its, and it was not the only such school. There were about 2 such schools in Montreal, and one that was about 50% Jewish. And look, what can I tell you? To have to say the Lord's Prayer every morning, is that so terrible? Especially since they were very sweet. We said the Lord's Prayer, and we did not have to include the name of Jesus.
Right.
So the Lord's Prayer is from the Old Testament. I mean, it's from the Hebrew Bible. So what was wrong with that? I mean, none of us at the time felt that we were being mistreated on that account.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that when you say the Lord's Prayer, I mean, listen, the Lord's Prayer has got many, many thoughts in it that are really, which are noble, really. But also it makes you stop and look up a little bit. I think that when we secularize our culture to the point where God has been erased, obviously you don't want to be coerced into your faith, certainly in a school situation, right? And
Right.
Obviously it wasn't coercive to you. You came
No.
out. I think you're still Jewish. You have certainly the credentials of being, untarnished by that experience. But it does, it makes people stop and look up and say, okay, there is a God in heaven who I have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to comport myself in such a way that is positive. So I understand that, and I wouldn't even mind saying the Shema Israel day by day. That would be probably a good thing too.
Well, it's a wonderful thing, and Bob, really, I mean, the most troubling thing about it is that when one doesn't say the Lord's Prayer, at the very least, one would want to pledge allegiance to the United States of America. In other words, I think it's very healthy to think of yourself as part of something larger than merely yourself. And you're right, saying a prayer is, I would say, probably the best. But second best is thanking your country, your polity, and understanding that you are part of something very large and wonderful, and feeling that you owe it allegiance and owe it responsibility. That is a wonderful thing, and it's sad that very few. I think I don't know. It's not customary any longer in every public school to say these prayers and to say the pledges.
Yeah, certainly not prayer, because that has been
certainly not prayer.
Yeah,
No.
they have removed that from the public school system a long time ago, and so that has been something that we have lost. And even when I was a child, we did not say prayers. But okay, that. I agree with you completely that saying a pledge to the American flag, and we certainly did that as children, but and you're beginning to segue into something that I want to talk about in a second, and that is that sense of gratitude, because this is kind of how I found you, was by hearing you on a film that was done, and your point that you made very clearly was this concept of gratitude. We're going to talk about that in 1 second, but we're going to take a break, Ruth. And friends, you're listening today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We're speaking today with Ruth Wisse. She's got a lot of things that she's done, but more recently, she's written a book called Free as a Jew, a personal memoir of national self-liberation. Friends, don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Hamilton Review podcast is brought to you by Hamilton Babies, 9 kid-friendly products designed for the little loves in your life. Find them at hamiltonbabies.com or amazon.com. Also consider Dr. Hamilton's recently published book, 7 Secrets of the Newborn, available at Barnes & Noble, your local independent bookstore, and amazon.com.
So, friends, welcome back to the Hamilton Review. We're having a conversation today with Ruth Wisse. Ruth, we finished the first half of the show talking about something that you really embody, and that is this concept of gratitude. And I can just see it in your face and hear it in your words. But that gratitude, to a degree, came a little bit, reading your book, of course, forgive me for prying into your life here, but you did write this book, so I'm allowed to know. But your father, Leo, was a person of great gratitude. And one thing he told you, which I thought was really profound, even though there was clearly anti-Semitism happening, I guess, on a bigger scale, in the concept of none is too many, that idea of in Ottawa. Your father always said to you, never, ever criticize Canadians or the Canadian government. And that, to me, speaks of a man who certainly understands that no institution is perfect, but yet he forbade you from really speaking against the Canadian government. And that I found that to be interesting. And I think that clearly that sense of great gratitude that you have felt all of your life is really has been passed down from your father. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Happily, yes. Well, I would agree with everything that you've said, except forbade me. My father could never have and would never have forbidden me to say anything, because ours was a house of discussion and argument. I really enjoy good argument, over issues. And that was done all the time in our house. But one day I came home and I had been reading about our immigration to Canada, not ours, but I had been reading about immigration policy to Canada altogether. And my father had always said that Canada was so wonderful and wonderful. And there I was in college and reading this new information. And I said, you always tell us that Canada is so wonderful and we can't criticize Canada. But I read that the year in which we were allowed to arrive in Canada, there were only 250 Jews allowed in the country then. And I think not even that many.
Yeah.
So I said, and my father said, yes, but we were 4 of them. And that I have never forgotten that, obviously, because I understood exactly what he meant. He said, yes, we could complain about policy at large and all the rest of it. No, that's not our experience. What you have to emphasize is the positive. What you have to emphasize is the good. And you have to, by all means, as you said, we have to be grateful.
Yeah.
Because we are those 4. We live here, we benefit. And that has to be our experience of the country. It has to be one of that kind. You can't carry a negative feeling if your own experience has been really one of thanksgiving. And, I could go farther. My parents are really the example of gratitude for me because I have so much to be grateful to them for. One, for how far-seeing they were to make plans to get us out of Europe, but also for many other things. Look, they had 4 children. One child had died very tragically when she was 2 years old. And since you're a pediatrician, I mean, you of all people can understand how, what that did to them at the time. Nevertheless, my parents went on to have me. And then when we came to Canada, my mother had 2 other children. And my younger brother, who's 11 years younger than I am, who is 17 years younger than my older brother, she had him kind of defiantly. She was already in her early 40s. And she said she wanted really to bring another child into the world.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if my father was on board all the time, but on that last trip. But there she had my brother, and they were obviously, our family was much enhanced in that way. And one other thing, since you take the conversation in that direction, my parents had been on their own for a long time. My mother was orphaned when she was about 20. My father had left home when he was 15.
Wow.
So they were not at home, and they were not religiously observant. When they came to Canada, from the first year that we were there, when it came to the Passover holiday, for some amazing reason, my parents kept Passover as though we were a completely religiously observant family.
Amazing.
Now, it's amazing. Now, the laws of Passover are particularly strict.
That's right.
It's 8 days. You are not allowed to have any chametz, any bread products, anything relating to that in the house. You have to change the dishes in the house. You have 2 nights of Seder, which are very elaborate, where you go through the entire Haggadah, telling the whole story of the escape from Egypt, the whole story of the Exodus, and so on. Well, can you imagine a household which was not otherwise religiously observant, but that they did punctiliously?
Right.
And it is a holiday of Thanksgiving, you see, because what you do there is you reenact the Exodus, and you say, let every Jew feel himself as though he personally had come out of Egypt. Now, you see, in our household, maybe that's why they did this.
Sure.
In our household, it was not as if, you see, we could we really did feel as if we were reenacting, the story of the Exodus. So
No,
growing up,
I think is of course the Pesach is the story of the liberation of the Jews from Egypt, and is such this idea of being in slavery and being freed. And by the way, the Haggadah, how do you pronounce it?
yeah, Haggadah or Haggadah, yes, Haggadah.
Haggadah. It's really long. Now I've gone to Passover dinners where we abbreviate it. Okay, and I know that sounds like probably heretical, but the full version is really, really long, I have to say. So I'm impressed that your parents went through the whole thing. But clearly, this was something very meaningful to them because they too had made that escape. They had made that escape from, well, in this situation in Europe, it was really almost a death sentence to the Jewish people, certainly where you were living, and manifested by what happened to the members of your family who did not make it out. But that was something very obviously very, very meaningful and very real to them. So.
Sure.
And I'm sure that even to this day, that is a celebration that you have very solemnly in your family. So
Indeed.
interesting. That is interesting that your parents observed that. Did they were never kosher on a routine basis? Did you have Shabbat dinners?
Well, we certainly kept some holidays, but occasionally, yes, we would. My father worked in the factory out of town, so Shabbat dinners were mostly felt as the one night of the week when the family was all together. And
Right.
we were expected to be home on Friday nights. And then as the family went on, as life went on, it became more of a Shabbat dinner. My mother occasionally lit the candles. And as she grew older, I should think she did it more often. And the interesting thing is that all of us, the three my four children. My older brother died quite young, but the three children are all fairly observant.
Hmm.
We all have kosher homes, which was not the case in my parents' house. We all keep various levels of observance. And my husband died this past year.
Hmm.
And our three children have taken on the responsibility of saying Kaddish for him every day for the whole 11 months that it's prescribed. So this is quite moving to me because, of course, everybody does it, individually for themselves. But I think that they feel blessed to be able to do it. It's
that's interesting, and is the fact that your family became more observant. Possibly just being in that Jewish community in Montreal during that time was also part of that whole thing.
Absolutely.
So you talk so much about gratitude. Even in your book, you mentioned gratitude. One of the things that I find is that this is one of those things that's hard to teach gratitude. You talk to your kids and say you should be grateful, you should be thankful. We say these things to our kids, but you said something to me in our pre-call a couple of days ago about the Hebrew faith, the Jewish faith in particular, is very much you get up in the morning and you start the day with Thanksgiving. I think it's valuable just to have you articulate that. Tell us a little bit about this is a little bit of just what is said, but the essence of these prayers in the morning is thank you, God. And I'll let you take it from there.
Well, the obligation is one that adheres to men, and they put on tefillin. They put on phylacteries.
Yes.
You have to learn how to put on these phylacteries that bind the head to the heart, basically. And it's with the phylacteries that you engage in prayer, and the prayers are there for you. And you pray, you thank basically for everything. My mother you see, who was not observant and who didn't pray and who didn't like to go to the synagogue. She felt that she could talk to God directly. She had a direct path, so she liked to pray at home. But she once taught me the prayer that you say for going to the bathroom, which as a child I found quite amusing, amazing. I can't even remember what I was surprised by it. Apparently, this prayer was something that she took with her from childhood, but it must have meant a lot to her because, for some people, that's not such an easy movement, right? It sounds so natural that you go to the bathroom in the morning. But, if it doesn't come so naturally, then the idea of saying a prayer for it really makes a lot of sense. But we're getting a little bit into the specificities and away from the main thing. You say prayer over, as Christians do, over food.
Sure.
You say grace over a meal. And, sometimes we become too self-conscious, I think, because we say, it's just automatic. These are just words. We're just paying lip service to these things. Well, I don't think it's that. You see, I think that the words, yes, sometimes they're just automatic. You say them quickly. You just can't wait to get through them. But, it teaches you that you haven't earned everything.
Yeah.
You have to be, you have to know that you stand before things which have been given you. There's none of us who can say that we've earned everything that has come to us.
Yeah.
And more you feel kind of beholden. And there has to be a context for gratitude. It's not just that you feel it, but there has to be a context. And when you learn prayers, that's the context for gratitude, basically. Yeah. It's
at least it begins to seep into your DNA. I think it seeps into your psyche, and you begin to look at maybe really everything. And I think that the whole, I guess as a pediatrician, I'm continuing to be a pediatrician, Ruth, because I continue to find the wow, the miracle of life. I was in the hospital today, and a new baby. I picked up a new baby, and this was a baby that yesterday was in the womb of a mother. And I look at the father and I say, "What do you think about this? This child was in your wife's tummy yesterday. What do you think about that, Dad?" And the dads always they look at me. They look and they kind of go, "Wow!" And that that wow moment, that wow thought is something that I continue to carry with me, and I think that everything really is this life that we live is very, very precious, and that sense of gratitude. Is something that I certainly try to inculcate into my own children. I also have to inculcate that. I have to put it into I have to continue to think about that. Thank you, God, for the air that we breathe, the birds in the trees, the flowers that grow. I mean, all these, the earth is full of His glory. I'm quoting the Bible there. That scripture. That I'm concerned in our current culture, and maybe we'll make this a little bit more relevant to kids, where kids and culture collide, is that I'm seeing less of that. I'm seeing a little bit more entitlement in our young people, and I just want to ask you that question. Are you seeing that? You were at Harvard. You've been in higher institutions of higher learning all of your life, really. Is that something that you have seen as well?
Well, there's something, I don't think you know this about me, but the area in which this has been most troubling to me is the area of women, because many years ago already, before I got to Harvard, when I was teaching at McGill, but it had nothing to do with the students. It had to do with just the culture around me. The women's movement began to be strong, and it began to be a grievance movement. It was not just a movement for equal rights, but it turned from a movement for equal rights, once one had the equal rights, it began to feel like a movement of grievance, why don't we have this? Why do men have? What do this have? For example, I met a young woman who was getting married, and the first thing she said to me was, my husband is going to make the bed in the morning, not me. And making the bed in the morning, it took 1 second. I mean, we have fitted sheets. It seemed to me really, I could see it was the grievance. That's where the difference between grievance and gratitude hit me very hard. And I began to say to anyone who would listen, look, what you have to begin with is that what's been given to women, modern women. And so some people think that what's been given to us is kind of the right to have the pill or to have diaphragms that can prevent you from that you can have sex without consequences. But that's not it. It's precisely what you were saying. The idea that women can expect to raise all the children that they have.
Wow.
Our generation really basically believes that if you have a child, well, of course, it's most likely that that child is going to grow up, right?
Yeah, no, that's true.
Child mortality, has sort of changed so dramatically. Whereas for my grandparents, I'm not talking 7 generations ago, my grandparents, my paternal grandmother had 10 children to keep the 5 that she had.
Wow.
My maternal grandmother also had lost several children. And then my mother lost a child. I mean, it was the most natural thing in the world that childbirth was so difficult and that raising children was so difficult. So I sometimes say, why didn't we create a prayer for that? Why didn't we create a prayer to say thank you for letting me live in a time when I can expect to bring all my children to adulthood?
That is such a good point, Ruth, because I try to tell people about, I spend a fair amount of my life in third world countries in Africa and South America doing medical mission trips. And I see cultures where they don't have the resources we have in North America, in US and Canada, certainly. And you see that loss. You see children who don't make it. You also see mothers who deliver in their homes and hemorrhage and die. Every trip I go on, I meet orphans whose mothers have passed, and I'm always kind of shocked by that, because that's a rare phenomenon to actually have the loss of a mother. Maternal loss in America is almost zero. It does happen, of course, but it is extremely low. So yes, we can. Ruth, I would like you to make a prayer for that purpose. If you can talk to your whoever's in your life who can help you with that. But I think that would be a prayer that we can kind of hand out. I'll hand it out myself at the hospital every morning.
Okay. Excellent.
No, I will.
Instead of that.
So teaching children gratitude it can begin with a prayer. Any other thoughts about teaching children gratitude?
Well, I don't know. I think that it's easier to do it within a given context. It's funny that we consider ourselves to be a multicultural society, but people who are raised in specific cultures sometimes feel queasy about it, as if there's something un-American to staying within your cultural religious orbit.
Yeah.
And this happens among Jews who think, really, if I'm very liberal, shouldn't I just be ecumenical? Why do I have to stay with these particularities? Why shouldn't I just be a universalist and have these same values, but within a universal context? And they sometimes think that that's a higher stage of development. Now, that seems to me a very strange way of thinking, that to be a universalist is a higher stage of development. I have never felt that.
Yeah.
I really think, especially if you're fortunate enough to be raised within a strong, good, healthy religious and cultural tradition, you're so fortunate. And to pass that on.
No, there is no question that religious values have been the foundation of families. They're the foundation of culture. And listen, in particular to the Jewish, to those who are of the Jewish faith, there is we all the Gentiles out there understand that this concept of being a chosen people, that is something that was not your idea per se. It was not my idea. It was the idea of the Lord. He chose the Jews to be the Jews, and so there's that sense of chosenness and uniqueness, and certainly, I think if I was part of the Jewish clan, I would embrace that and not run away from it. That's for sure. So listen, would you agree, Ruth?
I would. I would just say that, I have to say that one of the peculiarities of Judaism is this, which I think is important to say. Anyone who wants to can become a Jew.
Yes.
But the other part of it is that Judaism does not feel that everyone has to. There are other ways of being a good person. So this is a combination that I very much admire in Judaism. The idea that if you really want to become a Jew, there are ways of becoming a Jew. And then you're not even supposed to ask a convert. You're not supposed to even refer to a convert as having converted. You're a Jew like anyone else, right? But the other part of that is that there are other good people in the world. So this combination of feeling comfortable as a minority among others, and yet feeling that if you want to put yourself under this obligation, even if you're not born into it, you can join it. I think, I like that balance.
No, I think that sense of freedom, that there's no coercion. That's for darn sure. And I've never felt like I certainly live in a world surrounded by Jewish people. Never have felt coerced in any way, ever. Yes. Well, I'm watching our time, Ruth, sure. And you have been so kind and gracious with coming on our show today. I have a couple last questions for you. First of all, you are now part of an organization called the Tikvah Fund, and can you just tell a little bit about the Tikvah Fund, because I want people to know a little bit about this and what your purpose is, and how people can find the Tikvah Fund.
Oh, that's very kind of you to ask, because I would like to speak about it. Well, the Tikvah Fund was really created in response to something that is a sense that it wasn't there, and that is teaching about Judaism at the finest possible, introducing people again to the texts that they may not know about, and doing it very much within the American context. In other words, one of the things that Tikvah has been doing is really, for example, exploring some of the Hebraic roots of America, and making sure that one understands the relationship between Jewish culture and Western civilization, of which we are now a part, so on. And definitely teaching about the land of Israel, the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and knowing the sources, knowing it so that you can possess it, you see.
Yeah.
And so Tikvah runs a website. It has a website where you can find access to all the online courses that it offers, to all the seminars that are open to people. And also it has a daily Mosaic, which is a web magazine that has its own articles, and then gives you links to 5 articles every day that are considered to be valuable to know about. So in general, what it has become is a cultural hub.
Okay.
Rewarding cultural hub.
Kind of an educational hub, I guess, too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly.
And so, okay, well, that's important. I wanted you to articulate that.
Thank you.
And the other thing, Ruth, is how can people find you if they want to? Your book is available. Her book, again, friends, is called Free as a Jew, a personal memoir of national self-liberation. Is this book available through Amazon or on?
Amazon, definitely. Yes.
And
yes, it is.
And,
yes.
And how can people find you personally? If do you have a website or any kind of a site?
Yes, well, I kept my Harvard email.
And that is what?
Either through Tikvah.
Okay.
It's Wisse at fas.harvard.edu. I mean, you can find it on, the web. It's on the Harvard. If you look it up, Wisse at Harvard, you would get the.
We'll find you. Okay.
Yes,
beautiful.
you can find me. Sure.
I'll find you. You're pretty out there. I actually know that you're out there. A lot of people seem to know you. I can tell you that. So,
yes, okay.
Ruth, it has been such a pleasure having you on the Hamilton Review today. Honestly, you're a wonderful woman, and my hope is our paths will actually cross, and I can meet you personally. So, thank you again.
Good to know you. Thank you very, very much.
And friends, thank you for listening to the Hamilton Review today. We have been conversing with Ruth Wisse, a wonderful woman, and such a pleasure. So friends, until next time, be well and take hope. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.